Why is Japan turning against immigrants? Here's something that breaks every rule about young people and immigration. Historically, younger generations everywhere are more open to immigration, more comfortable with diversity. But Japan reversed it completely. Recently, Japan re-elected a government with the largest single-party majority in post-war history. The leader's name is Takaichi. She's a nationalist, and she's promising to restrict immigration. But we've all heard that Japan has a population crisis and it needs millions of foreign workers to survive, but it just voted to keep them out. Youth now express the highest opposition to foreign workers of any age group. Opposition jumped 13 percentage points in a single year. And here's what's strange. If you followed the election through mainstream Japanese media, immigration barely came up. But on X and TikTok, it was the only thing that anyone was talking about. So why are young Japanese people, who should be the most globally minded, also the most hostile to the migrants they economically depend on? And why did the issue dominating their feeds never make the evening news? The answer is a generation that watched the West's immigration experiment and decided, not here. I'm John, a sociologist who studies East Asian societies, and I spent the last year tracking this shift in real time. In the next few minutes, I'll break down the three social forces creating what Japan is calling the silent invasion. Here's the current picture. Japan's population isn't just shrinking, it's shrinking faster than any developed nation in history. Official projections put it around 104 to 107 million by 2040. Down from today's 124 million. I talk about this in another video in depth here. So they need to bring workers in. As of October 2025, Japan has 2.57 million foreign residents. That's up almost 12% in a single year. Nearly 1 in 32 workers right now in Japan are foreign-born, tripled since 2012. But here's what jumps out. This acceleration happened while public opposition exploded. In just 1 year, the share of Japanese who oppose accepting more foreign workers jumped from under half to nearly 6 in 10. That's a pretty big flip in how people feel. 2/3 say foreigners worsen public safety, yet most also acknowledge that foreigners help address labor shortages. So it's not like people don't see the need. They're saying yes to the problem, but no to one particular solution.
There is a solution, you know.
Now, the labor crisis is real. Japan's working age population has dropped by nearly 14 million since the mid-90s, and it's still falling. By 2040, the country will be short 11 million workers. And that's not a guess. Businesses are already fracturing. Labor shortage bankruptcies hit 350 last year, up 32% from the year before. So the tension is clear. In the past year, Japan added about 300,000 foreign workers and elected a government promising to slow that down. And geography makes us feel bigger than the numbers suggest. Foreign workers aren't spread evenly. They cluster in major cities. That's nothing new. Chinatowns, Little Italys, immigrant enclaves have always been part of the story. But some smaller towns tell a different story. One village in Hokkaido is now over a third foreign. And then there's Kawaguchi in Saitama, home to about 2,000 to 3,000 Kurds. In the next few minutes, you'll see why this town became ground zero for Japan's immigration debate. But the real shift isn't demographic, it was political. Let's speed run through what happened. In October 2024, Ishiba becomes prime minister. He's LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, which has governed Japan for almost all of the last 70 years. He's moderate on immigration, but over the next year, the LDP loses its majority in both houses of parliament. Ishiba resigns, and then things speed up. Because while the LDP was losing ground, something else was growing. Sanseito, a nationalist party that Western media has labeled far-right, went from 1 seat to 14, with almost 13% of the national vote, on a platform of silent invasion and the restrictions to fight it, by framing immigration as a demographic threat. What's alarming is that 20% of 18-year-olds voted for Sanseito. And once again, we see youth outvoting their historical consensus.
To the power of youth!
Sanseito was never going to govern Japan, but it didn't need to. It was a signal, proof that anti-immigration sentiment was picking up steam, and the LDP read the room. On October 21st, Sanai Takaichi became the prime minister, not through a national election. In Japan's parliamentary system, the ruling party picks its leader, and the LDP picks someone from its nationalist wing. Think of it as Japan's establishment drifting right in response to what voters were already saying. Takaichi didn't need Sanseito's platform, she just needed its proof of concept.
日本の最大の問題は人口減少であるとの認識で立ち、子ども・子育て政策を含む人口減少対策を検討していく体制を構築しました。人口減少に伴う人手不足の状況において外国人材を必要とする分野があることは事実です。
Her first move was to create a minister of well-ordered coexistence with foreign nationals. It's a euphemism for restriction. She orders all ministries to draft immigration policy changes by January 2026. On January 23rd, the Council of Ministers lock in the framework. Stricter visas, PR requirements hiked, language tests mandated, visa fees jumped from 3,000 yen to 15,000 yen for single entries. Then she calls for a snap election for February 8th. Her platform wasn't, should we restrict? It was, if you like what you see, give us more seats and we'll do more.
Don't believe in yourself. Huh? Believe in me. Believe in the Kamina who believes in you.
The mandate was huge. LDP won 316 seats, the largest single party total since World War II. Its total coalition got 352 out of 465. That's a whopping 75%, 10 points over a two-thirds supermajority. The Sanseito signal and the LDP establishment response were both validated that election night. And the opposition getting destroyed is seriously just underreporting the damage. The centrist Reform Alliance, built to counter Takaichi, campaigned on welfare, tax cuts, and fighting the right-wing shift. Their immigration stance was to push for an inclusive society. And the results came in. 172 seats stripped down to 49, and the co-leaders resigned the same night. Voters didn't just embrace restrictions, they punished a party that wouldn't talk about immigration. Now, something strange happened on the way to this election. Mainstream media, such as NHK, Asahi, Yomiuri, framed it around the economy, defense, pensions, and constitutional revision, just like the opposition. Immigration? It barely got a mention. But on X and TikTok, it dominated. We're talking endless posts with hashtag foreigner fatigue and hashtag silent invasion. Voters were seeing immigration debates everywhere online, but nowhere in their newspapers. So they backed Takaichi, who tackled it head on. Drop in the comments, why do you think the media dodged it like that? Now, let me get meta for a second. I ran into the literal same bias while making this video. The AI tools that I used for research and writing kept pivoting away from, we don't want immigration, to, but you need workers, without any real explanation. I had to push back hard to keep Japan's story straight. That pro-immigration tilt, baked into Western and Japanese media, is in the AI too. In other words, this disconnect between elite narratives and public mood is not unique to Japan. Quick plug, if you dig these cultural deep dives, hit sub for more. Like I said earlier, youth should be the most open to immigration, right? But Japan inverted it. December 2025 surveys show 7 in 10 young Japanese express safety concerns about immigration. Meanwhile, the elderly are actually more positive. 2/3 acknowledge foreigners help with labor shortages. The oldest generation is more welcoming than the youngest. This is unprecedented. So why did the youth turn hostile? The answer is economic. Tokyo rent runs about $550 to $800 a month. Median youth salary, someone in their 20s or 30s, is about $1,350 to $1,700 monthly. If you do the math, rent consumes about 40 to 60% of gross income. That's drowning. and I dive into more about how it's stopping Japan from having babies in this video here. Now, into this setting walks a foreign worker, willing to accept lower wages and tighter living conditions. From the Japanese perspective, it's obvious. Foreigners will undercut wages and tank my housing options. It's straightforward economics. When you're already in a tough spot, cheaper alternatives who are willing to live below normal Japanese standards become a threat. And social media is the big multiplier. Anti-immigrant content exploded. TikTok and Instagram Reels flooded with Sanseitou-affiliated creators. At least 100 accounts with 50,000 to 500,000 followers each. The algorithm saw the engagement. It promoted the content. And more youth saw it. For youth already drowning in housing costs and wage competition, the message was simple. Immigration threatens your future. And it landed. We've seen the same playbook across the West with illegal migrants. And it's not me saying this, it's literally what Japanese youth are saying on X. We see what's happening in the West, and we're rejecting it. In all the online chatter, a recurring theme is that immigrants aren't integrating. So this begs the question, what explains the deeper system failing to integrate anyone? Japan's system was designed as a guest worker program, temporary labor, not settlement. It's similar to Singapore or the Gulf states, because Japan runs on a three-tier hierarchy. Tier 1, a TITP, Technical Intern Training Program Workers, and it had about 400,000 people the past year. In practice, most of these are labor positions. They're job-locked and they cannot change employers. Think of it as a much stricter version of America's H-1B system. Here's an example of how it works. A Vietnamese worker pays about $4,500 in migration fees just to get in, and 80% of them have to borrow money to do it. Once they arrive, monthly wages run about $1,000 to $1,200. Living costs eat over half of that, and so the math doesn't work. So workers do the only thing that they can. They run. In 2023, a record of nearly 10,000 TITP trainees walked away from their employers and vanished into Japan's informal economy. I chose Vietnam for this example because half of those who ran were Vietnamese. Now, the second tier, permanent residents, that's about 880,000 people. These are the long-term foreigners, people who've lived in Japan for years, often married to Japanese nationals or built careers there. They work, pay taxes, and access some services. But there's no automatic citizenship pathway. They're legal and contributing, but the system was never designed to make them permanent. I've got friends who lived over a decade in Japan using this status. Tier 3, citizens, which are the government's sole responsibility, and they just voted for change. And the housing market drives the point home. Government surveys have consistently found 4 in 10 foreigners get rejected when looking for a place to live. And unlike most developed countries, it's perfectly legal. Japan has no anti-discrimination law for rental houses. Landlords can openly list no foreigners allowed. Some listings will even accept pets, but not foreigners. And landlords can legally say things like, "You seem nice, but our policy is no foreigners." End of discussion. So while low-skilled immigrant life is hard, the system was never designed to integrate them. It was a bargain they took when they went to get paid for their labor. But when newcomers go to Japan and break its rules and problems emerge, the non-Japanese people become high-profile cases. Just look up a case of the Kurds in Kawaguchi. And to be clear, I'm not singling them out, but these stories were literally all over mainstream news and social media, so both sides agree here. In July 2023, a knife fight broke out between 2 Kurds over an affair. Relatives and their friends, around 100 Kurds total, swarmed the hospital parking lot, sparking a brawl that stopped emergency services for over 5 hours, paralyzing critical care, and requiring riot police. It endangered lives by blocking medical access, and it blew up all over social media. Then the sexual assaults. A Kurdish man was convicted of assaulting a teenage girl and received a suspended sentence, basically a slap on the wrist. While still on probation, he was arrested again for assaulting a 12-year-old. He fled the country, got caught on return, and was eventually deported. Back-to-back sexual assaults on minors by the same person. These repeat attacks on minors are particularly scary because, don't forget, Japan is known to be a country so safe that it's normal for grade 1 kids to walk to school by themselves.
中には速度を落とさず交差点に進入。ウインカーも出さずに曲がるトラックも。
トラックが本当ギリギリ1台通れるくらいの道幅になってますね。想像以上に大きなトラック、この道幅をギリギリに走っていますね。
毎日危険を感じているといいます。大型トラックの騒音。
大きな音もしますし、細かく今道路もですね振動してます。こういったことがトラック通るたびに起こるということです。
In September 2023, an unlicensed Kurdish driver killed 2 motorcyclists in a hit and run. And social media keeps the fire going. Stories of reckless driving, public urination, noisy gatherings, even assaults on Japanese kids in parks. Individually, they may seem minor or isolated, but together, they build this overwhelming sense of lawlessness that terrifies people on the ground. Now, from everything I've researched, overall crime in Kawaguchi is actually down over 20 years, and Kurdish-related arrests total 44 in 2023, less than 1% of the total. Sounds minor, right? But that's just the absolute number in a city of 600,000 people. Per capita, it's a different picture. Turkish nationals in Saitama, mostly Kurds, are arrested at 15 times the rate of Japanese nationals. It's the highest overrepresentation of any foreign group in a prefecture. And here's the thing, 49% of the residents now say they feel unsafe, up from 32% the year before. Locals talk about forming patrols, officials push for deportations, Kurdish families face attacks, and kids are scared to go outside. A handful of cases that cross Japanese cultural lines snowball into massive sentiment shifts. You literally don't hear of 100-person brawls in Japan outside of Tokyo Revengers. The perception of migrant crime isn't limited to the Kurds. Surveys show 68% of Japanese say foreigners worsen public safety, and 60% believe immigration increases crime. At first glance, the data backs some of this. Foreign arrests make up about 5.5% of penal code offenses, while foreigners are roughly 4% of the population. But that headline hides a sharper pattern. Groups on the right, Chinese, Koreans, Westerners, ethnically Japanese returnees such as Brazilians or Peruvians, have stable status. Their rates match or beat Japanese nationals. On the left, Kurds in endless asylum limbo, Vietnamese TITP runaways, and African or Latin Americans on shaky permits or informal work. The less stable your status, the higher the friction. It's actually the same global pattern. People in the lowest socioeconomic rungs with fewest protections tend to commit more crimes. It's just that Japan's system sorts by visa category instead of neighborhood, but the outcome is identical. Precarity breeds desperation. Policing widens the gap too. 71% of foreigners get stopped on the street versus approximately 13% of Japanese. There's some selective enforcement, and there's also some real patterns in high-friction groups. Both can be true at the same time. So back to the big picture. Business leaders keep saying labor shortages are critical. Over 6 in 10 of the public admits workers are needed, yet almost 6 in 10 oppose bringing in more. The contradiction is locked. Japan needs people, and from this election, it's betting on automation, restructuring, and managed decline. Anything but the social costs of mass immigration. In fact, this sentiment runs so deep that open anti-immigrant protests, one that would be called straight-up racist in the West, are now spilling into the streets. In August 30th, 2025, around 3,000 people marched in central Osaka, waving Japanese flags and banners like, "Don't make Japan Africa." It was sparked by misinformation around a JICA cultural exchange program with African countries. Fears of a flood of migrants that officials repeatedly debunked, but the outrage was real. There's signs of how quickly cultural anxiety can turn into public action when people feel the old social contract is breaking. And perhaps the deepest social contract in developed countries is with capitalism. Capitalism runs on endless growth. More workers, more consumers, bigger GDP. A decade ago, one of my classmates from Oxford was a Japanese demographer, and I asked him about Japan's population decline. He described the population pyramid flipping, a wide elderly top a narrow youth base. They call it the Coffin. Leave it alone, he said in a matter-of-fact, circle of life kind of way. It will stabilize eventually. And back in 2017, immigration wasn't the flashpoint it is now. Most developed nations see the coffin and reach for the standard fix. Import younger workers to prop up taxes and growth. But immigration doesn't reverse native decline. It delays it while importing new social tensions. Businesses push hard for cheaper labor, and most countries follow because businesses run the show. Japan stepped onto that road, looked at the West's result, and said, nope, with a sharp U-turn. But to be clear, Takaichi isn't shutting the door. Japan has set a cap of over 1.2 million foreign workers through 2028 and is replacing the exploitative intern program with a new system that gives workers more rights. The crackdown is on permanent settlement and bad behavior, not immigration itself. Japan wants the labor, it just doesn't want the immigrants to stay. And from the people I've spoken to on the ground, from politicians, long-term residents, and friends who have lived there for decades, the reality is much less polarized than social media makes it look. The daily sentiment is pro-social cohesion and integration, not anti-foreigner. This election, Japan chose social cohesion over unchecked expansion. Despite the wishes of some on the left and the right, it's choosing to filter carefully instead of slamming the door shut. It's accepting the coffin on its own terms, letting the pyramid shrink while keeping the workers flowing, just without the poorly behaved permanent settlement that other countries defaulted into. The transition will still hurt. We're talking 20 to 30 years of restructuring, rising unemployment, failing businesses, and stagnant wages early on. But the bet is that managed intake without mass settlement buys you stability without the social fractures. With Japan's robotic and AI leadership, that's a logical bet. Korea faces identical demographics and shortages, but chose the opposite, increasing visa quotas, especially seasonal and skilled workers. Two neighbors, same crisis, different wages, and we won't know the winner for decades. Here's the core lesson. Capitalism only functions with social cohesion. It requires a benevolent bargain. Owners risk big for big rewards. Workers get living wages and security. Right now, the bargain feels so broken for ordinary people, so they're refusing to pay social cohesion as the price. When benevolence ends, the coffin starts looking rational. And the paradox won't resolve soon. We're just at the beginning of this journey, and honestly, it's hard to say what will happen. Social scientists spot past patterns pretty well, but we suck at predicting the future. Japan might hold course and stabilize small, or perhaps economic pressures could force a cave-in. A black swan event like Skynet may derail everything. I genuinely don't know. But what I do know is that the next 2 decades will reveal if a democracy can prioritize stability over endless growth and actually follow through the pain. It's easy to say that you'll go on a diet, but hitting the gym is a different story. If you like this deep dive, you'll like this one too. And if you made it this far, please like and sub.